Veteran found an abandoned 1970 police motorcycle. The badge number uncovered a dark secret. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's mysterious and gripping tale. Have you ever stumbled upon something that made you pause, as if the world around you just shifted? For one veteran, that moment came when he drove through a forgotten part of town. As the road curved, lined with trees bending under the weight of time, his eyes caught a glimpse of something strange. A rusted motorcycle, half buried in overgrown grass, almost as if it had been forgotten by history itself. He slowed his car to a stop, the tires crunching on the gravel as his heart raced with curiosity. This wasn't just any bike. This was a 1970 police motorcycle, its chrome faded, its leather seat cracked and worn. But what truly caught his attention was the badge number etched into the motorcycle's frame. It was worn, the numbers barely visible, but still legible enough to draw his attention. It wasn't just the bike itself that piqued his interest. Something about this motorcycle felt out of place, like it had been left behind by someone who didn't want to be found. The area around it was eerily silent. No sounds of traffic, no chatter of people, just the rustling of leaves in the breeze. The veteran got out of his car, his boots making a soft thud on the earth as he approached the bike. As he knelt beside it, brushing away the layers of dust, a chill ran down his spine. There was something oddly familiar about the badge number, like a memory from a long time ago. He couldn't shake the feeling that this bike had been part of something much bigger, something hidden in the shadows. As his fingers traced the badge, a sense of dread washed over him. What secret was buried with this motorcycle? Why had it been left here, in the middle of nowhere? And what was the dark history tied to that badge number? He couldn't leave without finding out. The veteran stood up, looking around the abandoned area once more, trying to piece together the story of this motorcycle. He knew he had to uncover the mystery, no matter where it led. The veteran stood there for a moment, staring at the abandoned motorcycle, his heart pounding with curiosity and a growing sense of unease. The quiet of the place seemed to press in on him, as if the very air around him was holding its breath. He glanced around the overgrown clearing, the edges of the bike half hidden by the tall grass and vines. He could tell this spot had been forgotten by time, as if no one had set foot here in decades. It was strange. This wasn't just an old bike. There was something more, something hidden in plain sight, waiting to be discovered. He knew he had to find out what it was. With a deep breath, he knelt down beside the motorcycle again, this time focusing on the badge number more intently. He wiped away the dust with the sleeve of his jacket, revealing the faint numbers, each one worn but still visible. The more he looked at it, the more it seemed to draw him in, almost as if the number was calling out to him. The veteran's mind began to race. Was this some kind of sign? Why would such an old bike be left here, abandoned like this? And why was the badge number so familiar? He felt like he had seen it before, but where? The memory tugged at the edges of his mind, just out of reach. He had to know. He ran his hand over the bike's frame, his fingers grazing the cold metal. It felt heavy, but sturdy, like it had once been something important. As he inspected the bike further, he noticed a few more details. A small compartment near the handlebars, just large enough to hold something. His heart skipped a beat as he pried it open. Inside, there was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age and worn at the edges. He carefully unfolded it, his hands trembling slightly as he read the faded writing. It was an old map, one that showed a route through the local area, marked with several locations that didn't seem familiar to him. The map was old, its lines jagged and uneven, as if it had been drawn hastily. But what caught his attention wasn't just the map, it was the marking on it. A large X, drawn in bold red ink, at a spot deep in the forest. Something about it felt like it was meant for him. He could feel the weight of it pressing down on him, like the map had been waiting for him to find it all these years. The veteran stood up, the map clutched tightly in his hand, his mind racing with possibilities. What was hidden at that spot? Was it connected to the motorcycle? And why had it been left here, abandoned in the woods, for so long? He knew he couldn't just walk away. The feeling that this was a piece of something much larger than just an old motorcycle was overwhelming. He had to follow the map, had to find the X marked on it, and uncover the secret that had been buried for decades. With a final glance at the bike, the veteran turned and headed into the trees, the sound of his boots crunching on the leaves the only noise in the quiet forest. His dog, a loyal companion who had been by his side through thick and thin, followed closely behind. The dog's ears were perked up, its eyes sharp and focused, as if it, too, could sense that something important was about to happen. The veteran's mind raced as he followed the map, his every step guided by the faint markings that led him deeper into the forest. The trees closed in around him, their towering branches reaching out like ancient guardians, casting long shadows over the ground. The air grew cooler, the silence more pronounced. With each step, the sense of unease grew, but so did the feeling that he was getting closer to something. The X on the map felt like it was pulling him forward, urging him to keep going, to discover whatever was hidden there. He glanced down at the map again, tracing the path with his finger. It seemed to lead toward an area that had once been a small, secluded cabin, long since abandoned and left to the elements. But the map didn't just mark the cabin. It marked something deeper in the woods, something beyond what anyone would expect. The veteran's curiosity pushed him on, his pace quickening as the forest grew denser. The dog stayed close, its eyes constantly scanning the surroundings, its instincts sharp. The veteran's thoughts swirled as he approached the area marked on the map. What was waiting for him there? A treasure? A secret? The unknown was just ahead, and with it, the promise of a discovery that could change everything. The veteran pushed forward, the map clutched tightly in his hand, his breath heavy as he made his way through the dense forest. The trees loomed over him, their gnarled branches twisting like silent sentinels, watching every step he took. His loyal dog, Ash, trotted just behind him, its ears perked up, nose twitching at every scent carried by the wind. The further they ventured into the forest, the more the world around them seemed to hold its breath. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper, and the silence between the trees felt heavier, like a secret long forgotten. The veteran could feel his pulse quicken, the hairs on the back of his neck standing up as if warning him that something was near, something that had been waiting for him. His mind raced as he thought about the map. What was it leading him to? What dark secret was buried here, in this forgotten corner of the world? The more he thought about it, the more certain he became that this wasn't just a chance discovery. This motorcycle, this map, and the badge number, it all felt connected, like a puzzle that only he could solve. As they continued, the forest began to thin out, and ahead, he could see a clearing through the trees. The sunlight struggled to break through the canopy above, casting dappled light on the ground, illuminating a small shack in the distance. It looked old, abandoned, just like the motorcycle. His heart skipped a beat as he realized this was the place marked on the map. The veteran's footsteps grew more cautious as he approached the shack. The old wood creaked under his weight, the air thick with the smell of mildew and decay. Ash growled lowly, its hackles raised, clearly unsettled by the eerie quiet. The veteran paused for a moment, his eyes scanning the surroundings. There was something about this place that felt wrong. It was as if the shack had been waiting here, hidden from the world for a reason. He walked carefully, up to the door, which was slightly ajar. His hand hovered over the rusty doorknob, and for a moment, he hesitated. What could be inside? His instincts told him that what awaited beyond this door could change everything. With a deep breath, he turned the knob and pushed the door open. It creaked loudly, echoing through the trees like a warning. Inside, the shack was dimly lit by a single, broken window on the far wall. Dust hung thick in the air, and the floor was covered in a layer of dirt and debris. The veteran stepped inside, his boots crunching on the floor as he moved deeper into the space. The walls were lined with old, rotting shelves, some of which had long since fallen into disrepair. But what caught his attention was the far corner of the room. There, partially hidden behind a pile of broken crates, was something gleaming. He moved closer, his heart pounding in his chest. As he cleared the debris, his eyes widened. It was a metal box, old but clearly valuable. The veteran knelt down, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for the box. It was heavy, solid, with intricate designs carved into its surface. He ran his fingers over the edges, feeling the worn grooves beneath his touch. This was no ordinary box. It was something far more significant. He glanced at Ash, who had stopped growling and was now sitting quietly beside him, watching with intent eyes. The veteran carefully opened the box, his breath catching as the lid creaked open. Inside, there was a collection of old papers, yellowed with age, and several photographs. He pulled them out one by one, his hands shaking. As he examined the first photograph, his stomach sank. It was a picture of the very same police motorcycle he had found earlier, parked outside the shack, with a group of officers standing around it. The veteran felt a chill run down his spine. These weren't just any officers. They were part of a special unit, a covert operation that had been buried in the city's past. The next photograph revealed a familiar face, the same officer whose badge number he had seen on the bike. The man in the photo had a stern expression, his eyes dark with secrets. The veteran recognized the name written on the back of the photo, Sergeant James McCall. He had heard that name before, in whispers, in the dusty corners of old police reports. McCall had been involved in a scandalous case decades ago, one that had been covered up by the force. But this was just the beginning. The veteran turned the next page in the box, revealing a set of documents marked with red stamps. As he read through the papers, his jaw tightened. They contained evidence of illegal activities, dark deals made between corrupt officers and criminal organizations. The case had been buried, erased from the records, but here it was, staring back at him in black and white. The veteran could hardly believe what he was seeing. This was the missing piece of the puzzle, the truth that had been hidden for so long. And it was clear that the motorcycle, the badge, and this shack were all connected to it. But what did this all mean for him? Why had he, of all people, been led here? And what would he do with this knowledge now that it was in his hands? As he sat there, holding the box and its secrets, the veteran realized that this discovery was only the beginning. The dark history of Sergeant James McCall, the abandoned motorcycle, and the corrupt officers involved in the cover-up were just the tip of the iceberg. And now, he had the power to uncover the rest of the story. The veteran sat back on his heels, staring at the box in his hands, his mind racing. The documents, the photographs, and the hidden truths they contained, all pointed to something far darker than he could have imagined. The shack, the motorcycle, the badge, it was all connected to a police cover-up, an unsolved mystery that had been buried for decades. He couldn't let it go. He had come this far, uncovering secrets that had been hidden in plain sight, and now, he had to find the truth behind them. But the deeper he looked, the more dangerous the path became. His hands trembled as he sorted through the papers. The name Sergeant James McCall stood out on every document, accompanied by names of people the veteran had never heard of, all tied together in a web of corruption. These officers, these men who were sworn to protect the law, had become part of a criminal syndicate. And McCall, the man whose badge number had started this journey, was at the center of it all. As the veteran continued to read, a sinking feeling settled in his stomach. He realized the significance of the box. This wasn't just about uncovering a past crime. It was about exposing an ongoing conspiracy. The syndicate had operated in the shadows, pulling strings and protecting their own, their influence still lurking in the present. What had started as a simple discovery of a forgotten motorcycle now seemed like a call to action. The veteran's mind raced with questions. Who else knew about this? Who was still protecting the secret? And most importantly, what would happen if the truth got out? A sudden growl from Ash, his loyal dog, snapped him out of his thoughts. The dog had been watching him closely, its amber eyes never leaving the box. The veteran turned and met Ash's gaze, his heart pounding. It was as if the dog understood the gravity of the situation. He stood up, closing the box carefully and tucking it under his arm. The air around him seemed heavier now, filled with the weight of the discovery. He couldn't stay here any longer. If there were people still involved in this, they would come looking. As he walked back to his car, the veteran couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Every rustle of the trees, every shadow that moved, felt like a threat. He didn't know who he was up against, but he knew he wasn't alone in this. There were still people who wanted the truth to remain buried, and they would stop at nothing to keep it that way. Back in his car, the veteran glanced at Ash, who was sitting quietly in the passenger seat, its eyes still alert. The drive back felt longer than it had on the way out. Every mile seemed to stretch on, as if the forest itself was trying to hold him back. The veteran's thoughts raced. He had the proof. He had the story. But what would he do with it? Who could he trust with something this big? He couldn't go to the police. They were likely just as corrupt as the officers in the files. He couldn't go to the media. They'd be easily silenced. No, this was something that needed to be handled carefully. The veteran had learned that the hard way. He had been a soldier for too long to make rash decisions. He needed a plan, and he needed to think it through. As he pulled up to his small, isolated cabin, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the driveway. The peaceful surroundings felt like a lie, a stark contrast to the storm that was brewing inside him. He parked the car and took a deep breath before stepping out. Ash jumped down from the car, trotting beside him as they walked to the cabin. The veteran entered the house, locking the door behind him. He set the box on the table and sat down, his mind still racing. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. The secret he had uncovered was far bigger than he had realized, and it was only a matter of time before the people involved came after him. He knew he couldn't keep the truth hidden forever, but he also knew that if he didn't act soon, it would be too late. The veteran glanced at Ash, who was lying quietly at his feet, and made up his mind. He would find out who was behind this, and he would expose them, no matter the cost. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The dark secret tied to that motorcycle, the badge, and Sergeant James McCall was about to shake the foundations of everything he knew. The veteran sat in the dim light of his cabin, the box still resting on the table before him. Ash, his loyal dog, lay curled up beside him, its head resting on its paws, as if sensing the gravity of the situation. The silence of the cabin felt like a heavy weight pressing in on him, broken only by the occasional crackling sound from the fire in the hearth. The veteran's mind raced with the contents of the box. Every document, every photograph, every piece of evidence had led him to this moment. He had uncovered something far bigger than he had ever anticipated. The truth about Sergeant James McCall, the corrupt officers, and the dark web of lies surrounding them. It was all here. But now he was at a crossroads. What was he supposed to do with this knowledge? He couldn't just sit on it. If he exposed the conspiracy, it would shake the very foundation of the town, and possibly even the entire state. There were powerful people involved, and they would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. The veteran had seen that kind of power before. He knew how dangerous it could be. He couldn't trust anyone, not the police, not the media. There was no one left to turn to. The weight of the decision was overwhelming. Should he go public with what he knew, or keep it hidden to protect himself and those he loved? The thought of putting his own safety at risk, and possibly even Ash's, made him hesitate. But then he thought of the people who had been hurt by this corruption, the families, the victims, the ones who never got justice. They had no voice, no power, and it was up to him to give them one. With a sigh, the veteran stood up, pacing the small room as he tried to make sense of his thoughts. Ash watched him, its eyes following his every movement. The dog had been his constant companion through thick and thin, and now, it seemed to be reminding him of something important. He wasn't alone. The veteran glanced at the clock on the wall. It was late, but sleep was impossible. His mind was too active, and his heart was heavy with the knowledge that he couldn't undo what he had uncovered. The time had come for him to make a choice. As he looked out the window, the night stretched out before him, cold and dark. The forest outside was a vast, silent expanse, but the faint glimmer of the moonlight on the trees seemed to offer a sense of clarity. It was as if the world itself was waiting for him to make his move. The veteran stepped to the table and picked up the box again. He ran his fingers over the papers, the photographs, and the map. The truth was right in front of him, but it wasn't just about exposing the past. It was about making sure the future was different. He had to act, but how? As if on instinct, the veteran turned to the phone on the counter. He knew who he had to contact. He had been thinking about it all night, but now, it felt like the only option. He dialed the number, his fingers trembling slightly as he held the phone to his ear. The line rang 3 times before a voice on the other end answered. Hello. The veteran took a deep breath. It's me. I have information. It's time to bring this to light. The voice on the other end was quiet for a moment. Are you sure? The person asked. Once this goes public, there's no going back. The veteran looked down at Ash, who was now sitting up, its eyes locked on him. I'm sure, he said, his voice steady, though his heart was pounding. This is bigger than me. It's bigger than any of us. The truth needs to come out. There was a long pause, and then the voice responded. All right, we'll do this together. I'll handle the logistics. You stay safe. We'll need a plan to make sure this doesn't get covered up. The veteran nodded, even though the person on the other end couldn't see him. Thanks. I'll be in touch soon. He hung up the phone and sat back down at the table, the weight of the decision still heavy on his chest. But as he looked at the box and the truth it held, he knew that this was the right thing to do. The first step had been taken, and there was no turning back now. Ash padded over to him and rested its head on his knee. The veteran reached down and scratched behind its ears. The dog had always been there for him, and now, it seemed to be offering him the silent support he needed. Tomorrow, the journey would begin. Tomorrow, he would expose the darkness that had been hidden for so long. And though the road ahead would be dangerous, the veteran was ready. He had the truth, and with it, he would fight to make sure the people who had been wronged would finally get the justice they deserved. The morning sun had just begun to peek through the trees as the veteran sat at the kitchen table, the weight of the decisions he had made last night still lingering in the back of his mind. He stared at the box of evidence, now sitting in front of him like a reminder of the storm that was about to unfold. Ash, his loyal dog, sat at his feet, sensing the veteran's unease. The dog had always been his silent partner in everything, and now, more than ever, the veteran felt the importance of their bond. He had made the call. He had taken the first step, but the question that kept running through his mind was he ready to face the full truth? The road ahead was dark and full of unknowns. Once he exposed the conspiracy, there was no turning back. He knew that, but there was something deep inside him, a sense of justice that told him this was the right thing to do. The truth had to be revealed, no matter the cost. The veteran stood up, pushing the box aside for a moment. He needed to clear his head, to prepare for what came next. He grabbed his jacket and stepped outside, taking a deep breath of the cool morning air. The world outside his cabin felt so calm, so peaceful, yet he knew it wouldn't last. Every step he took seemed to echo in the quiet woods, a reminder of the urgency of his mission. He had to stay focused. The quiet of the forest was broken by the sound of his phone buzzing in his pocket. He pulled it out, his heart skipping a beat when he saw the name on the screen. It was the person from the night before. Hello, he answered, his voice steady despite the nervous energy building inside him. It's time, the voice on the other end said, calm and composed. We've set things in motion. The press is ready, but we need to be cautious. There are eyes everywhere. The veteran's grip tightened on the phone. He knew this was only the beginning. The danger was just starting to rise. I'll be ready, he said, his voice resolute. I'll meet you at the location. He hung up the phone and glanced at Ash, who had trotted up to his side, as if waiting for the next move. Let's go, boy, he muttered, his tone firm. He could feel the weight of the truth pressing down on him, but he knew that with every step he took, he was moving closer to justice. The veteran and Ash made their way to the car, and as they drove through the winding roads, the veteran couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every passing vehicle, every rustling tree, seemed to be a sign of the danger lurking just beyond his reach. But he didn't let that fear control him. He couldn't. The truth was too important. He had to push forward. As they neared the meeting location, a small, quiet cafe on the outskirts of town, the veteran felt the tension in the air grow. The cafe was empty except for the few patrons scattered at the tables. The veteran glanced around, his eyes scanning the room for the contact. He spotted the figure sitting at the far end of the room, a man in his 50s with graying hair, wearing a worn jacket and a hat pulled low over his eyes. The veteran approached the man, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. You're late, the man said, his voice low but laced with a hint of amusement. I had to make sure everything was set, the veteran replied, sitting down across from him. He leaned in, his gaze steady. I've got the information. It's all here, he said, gesturing to the bag resting by his side. The man nodded, glancing around to make sure no one was paying attention. We'll take it from here. But you need to be careful. We're not the only ones who know about this. The veteran's mind raced as he processed the words. What do you mean? He asked. The man's eyes narrowed. The people behind this, they've been covering their tracks for years. You think exposing the truth will stop them? They won't go down so easily. They have power, influence. The veteran's jaw tightened. He knew the stakes were high, but hearing it from someone else made it all the more real. "What do we do now?" he asked. The man leaned back in his chair, his expression darkening. "We need to make sure we have all the evidence, all the pieces. Once it's out there, there's no turning back. You need to be prepared for what comes next." The veteran nodded, his resolve hardening. "I'm ready. We do this now." They stood up, the man handing the veteran a folder. "Take this. It's everything you need to expose them." The veteran took the folder, the weight of it pressing into his hand like a final piece of the puzzle. He knew the danger was far from over, but for the first time, he felt the power of the truth in his hands. As they walked out of the cafe and into the morning light, the veteran knew one thing for certain. The battle had only just begun. The conspiracy was deep, and the road ahead would be long and filled with danger. But he was ready to face it, no matter what it took. The veteran walked out of the cafe, the weight of the folder heavy in his hand. Ash trotted beside him, its ears perked, sensing the tension in the air. As they stepped into the car, the veteran's mind raced. He had the evidence now. He had the truth. But what good would it do if no one would listen? The conspiracy was vast, and the people involved were powerful. The veteran knew this would not be an easy fight. As he drove, the quiet hum of the engine seemed to reflect the growing storm in his mind. He had a choice to make. He could expose the truth now, risk everything, or keep it hidden and walk away. The road ahead was uncertain, but the more he thought about it, the more the answer became clear. He couldn't back down. The victims deserved justice. He owed it to them, to those who had been wronged and silenced for too long. But even as his resolve solidified, doubt crept in. Who could he trust? The man in the cafe had given him the folder, but he didn't know him. Could he be trusted? The veteran had learned the hard way that trust was a rare commodity, especially in a world filled with corruption. He pulled into a small motel on the outskirts of town. It was quiet, the perfect place to lay low for a while. He needed time to plan, to figure out how to make sure the truth reached the right people. He grabbed the folder, and with Ash close behind, walked to the room. Inside, the veteran took a seat at the small table and opened the folder. The contents were more detailed than he had expected. Photographs, documents, and a map, all pointing to key locations and people involved in the conspiracy. There was no doubt now. This was bigger than he had imagined. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He was in over his head, but there was no turning back. The truth had a way of coming out, and he couldn't let this be swept under the rug. He spent hours going through the documents, piecing together the story. The more he learned, the more determined he became. He had to act fast. The longer he waited, the more likely it was that the people behind this would try to silence him. He couldn't let that happen. As the night wore on, the veteran made a plan. He would contact the few people he could trust, those who still believed in doing the right thing. They would help him expose the conspiracy. Together, they would make sure the truth came to light. But first, he needed to be sure that he had all the pieces of the puzzle. He picked up the phone and dialed a number, his fingers shaking slightly. The line rang for a moment before it was answered. "Hello," the voice on the other end said. "It's me," the veteran replied, keeping his voice steady. "I've got the evidence. I'm ready to move forward." The voice on the other end was quiet for a moment, as if processing the weight of the veteran's words. "Are you sure about this?" the voice asked. "Once this is out there, there's no going back." The veteran glanced at Ash, who was now lying on the bed, its eyes watching him closely. "I'm sure," he said. "The truth has to come out. We can't let them get away with this." The voice on the other end sighed. "All right, we'll meet tomorrow. Be careful. You're not the only one who knows about this." The veteran hung up the phone and sat back in the chair, his mind spinning. The meeting was set. The next step was clear. But as he glanced out the window, the quiet of the night felt like a lull before the storm. Tomorrow would be the beginning of something much bigger than just him. The battle for the truth had started, and he was ready to face whatever came next. He stood up, walked over to the window, and looked out at the dark road ahead. The silence of the night was broken only by the sound of Ash's soft breathing. The veteran took a deep breath, steadying himself for what was to come. Tomorrow, they would fight for the truth. Tomorrow, the conspiracy would be exposed. And no matter the cost, he would make sure that the victims finally got the justice they deserved. The next morning arrived colder than expected, a heavy fog hanging low over the ground. As if the world itself was shrouded in secrecy. The veteran stood in front of the mirror, his hand brushing through his disheveled hair, his reflection staring back at him with eyes that seemed older than they should be. The events of the past few days had aged him, each step further into this tangled web of lies and corruption weighing on him. His phone buzzed on the table beside him, snapping him from his thoughts. He picked it up, his thumb hovering over the screen as he saw the message. It was from the person he had been in contact with, his trusted ally in this fight for truth. "We're set. Be careful. Meet at the usual spot. They're watching." The veteran read the message twice, taking in the words with a sense of urgency. He knew this moment had been coming, but it was still hard to believe that it was finally here. He couldn't afford any missteps. The stakes were too high. He glanced over at Ash, who sat by the door, its amber eyes locked on him. The dog had been a steady companion through everything, and the veteran appreciated its quiet strength. "Let's do this," he murmured, as if the dog could understand. He grabbed the folder with the evidence, now carefully packed and ready to be delivered. Each page, each photograph, carried the weight of decades of lies, and now it was time for the truth to be revealed. The veteran stepped out into the cold, the air crisp and biting as he made his way to the car. The drive to the meeting spot felt longer than usual, the fog making everything seem distant and uncertain. His grip on the steering wheel tightened as his mind raced. He couldn't afford to trust anyone too easily, but he needed this to work. He needed to get the evidence into the right hands, and once it was, he hoped the public would see the truth for what it was. He arrived at the old, rundown diner that had been the meeting place for the past few days. The veteran parked his car a few blocks away, walking the rest of the way with Ash by his side. The familiar bell above the diner door rang as he pushed it open, stepping inside. The place was empty, save for one figure sitting at a booth in the corner. The man looked up as the veteran entered, his face hardening with recognition. "You're late," the man said, his voice low but firm. "We don't have much time." The veteran nodded, sliding into the booth across from him. "I have the evidence. It's all here." He placed the folder on the table, pushing it forward. The man glanced at the folder and then back at the veteran, his eyes narrowing. "This is it, then. The big reveal," he said, his tone filled with a mix of excitement and caution. "I can't guarantee how they'll respond, but we can't sit on this any longer." The veteran leaned back in his seat, his eyes scanning the diner. The weight of the decision sat heavily on his chest. There was no turning back now. "Once this goes public, they'll come for us," the man said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You know that, right?" The veteran nodded slowly. "I know. But the people who've been hurt by this, the ones who've been silenced for too long, they deserve the truth. This is bigger than us." The man hesitated for a moment before reaching into his coat pocket and pulling out a small, nondescript phone. He slid it across the table to the veteran. "Use this. It's encrypted. I'll make the arrangements. The press needs this, but we have to make sure we control the narrative." The veteran stared at the phone for a long moment before picking it up. He felt a sense of finality settle in his chest. "Let's do it." He grabbed the folder, holding it close to his chest. The man stood up and nodded, his expression hardening. "Good luck. And be careful." With that, the veteran left the diner, his mind filled with a mixture of dread and determination. The fog had lifted slightly, but the world still felt like it was holding its breath. He walked back to his car, his footsteps steady but heavy. Once inside, he pulled out the phone the man had given him and dialed the number that had been provided. The phone rang only once before it was picked up. "It's done. The evidence is ready," the veteran said, his voice calm but edged with anticipation. "Good," the voice on the other end replied. "Get to the location we discussed. We'll be ready." The veteran hung up, his hands shaking slightly. He took a deep breath and started the car, pulling out of the parking lot. He couldn't afford to waste any more time. He had the truth now, but getting it into the right hands was only the beginning. His heart raced as he drove, the road ahead uncertain, but the path was clear. He was committed, and nothing would stop him from seeing this through. The light ahead seemed to grow brighter as he neared his destination, and with it, a sense of purpose filled him. The veteran knew that once he delivered the evidence, there would be no turning back. The battle for justice had only just begun. The veteran's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as he navigated the winding road. His mind raced with thoughts of the meeting ahead. Everything he had worked for, every risk he had taken, all of it was coming to a head. The weight of the evidence in the back seat was more than just physical. It felt like a burden he couldn't escape. He glanced at Ash, who sat next to him, its head tilted slightly, as if sensing the tension in the air. The veteran wasn't sure what would happen after this. The conspirators were powerful, and they would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. He had seen it firsthand, the lengths people would go to in order to cover up the truth. But it didn't matter now. The veteran had made his decision, and there was no turning back. He drove on, the sun beginning to rise in the distance, casting a faint light over the road ahead. The small town he was headed to was quiet, as it always was at this time of morning. The air felt crisp, the streets almost empty. It was the perfect place to disappear, if only for a moment. He parked the car outside a small, inconspicuous building on the edge of town. The address had been given to him the night before, and it was clear that this was where the final stage of his mission would unfold. The veteran stepped out of the car, Ash following closely behind. He walked to the building's entrance, his steps deliberate and steady. The door was slightly ajar, and he pushed it open with a creak. Inside, the room was dimly lit, the air thick with anticipation. A man stood near the back of the room, his silhouette barely visible in the low light. He turned as the veteran entered, his expression unreadable. "You're here," the man said, his voice low and calm. "I wasn't sure you'd show." The veteran didn't answer immediately. Instead, he placed the folder on the table between them, his eyes never leaving the man's face. The man raised an eyebrow, his gaze flicking to the folder and back to the veteran. "Is it all here?" he asked, his tone betraying no hint of emotion. The veteran nodded. "Everything you need to expose them." The man walked over to the table and picked up the folder, flipping through the documents inside. His eyes scanned the pages quickly, absorbing every detail. The veteran could see his face shift, just slightly, as he processed the information. He looked up at the veteran, a cold smile forming at the corners of his mouth. "This is it, then," he said, almost to himself. "The proof we've been waiting for." The veteran crossed his arms, waiting for the next move. "Now what?" The man placed the folder back on the table and looked at the veteran seriously. "Now we make sure this gets out. But we have to be careful. These people are dangerous. We can't let them know what we have." The veteran's jaw tightened. "I know. That's why I'm here. I'm ready to go public with this." The man nodded, his expression hardening. "It's not that simple. We need a plan. If we go too quickly, we'll be exposed. We need to control the narrative. Get the right people on our side first." The veteran felt a pang of frustration. He had been sitting on this information for so long, and now that he finally had the chance to bring it to light, there were more obstacles. But he understood. He had been in situations like this before. "What do you need me to do?" he asked, his voice steady. The man walked over to a shelf and pulled out a small, unmarked box. He handed it to the veteran. "Take this. It's a secure line. We'll use it to contact the right people. They'll know what to do with the evidence." The veteran took the box, feeling its weight in his hands. He had no idea what was inside, but he trusted the man's judgment. "I'll make sure it gets to the right place," he said, his voice firm. The man gave a brief nod, his eyes narrowing. "Good. Once this gets out, everything will change. But you need to be prepared. There will be consequences. We're going up against some very powerful people." The veteran nodded, feeling the gravity of the situation. He had known this wasn't going to be easy, but hearing the man's words made the reality of it all sink in. "I'm ready," he said, his voice low but resolute. He turned to leave, Ash following closely behind him. As they stepped out into the cold morning air, the veteran felt a sense of finality. This was it. There was no turning back now. He had done what he needed to do, and now the truth was in motion. The world was about to change. As he walked to the car, the veteran glanced up at the sky, watching as the first light of dawn broke through the clouds. He didn't know what would come next, but he knew one thing for certain. The fight for justice had only just begun. The veteran drove through the winding streets, the secure line box resting on the passenger seat next to him. The faint hum of the engine was the only sound in the car, a stark contrast to the storm of thoughts racing through his mind. The plan was set in motion, but he couldn't shake the sense of unease that lingered. What was waiting for him on the other side of this? Was this really the right time to expose everything? His grip tightened on the wheel as he navigated the empty roads, the early morning light slowly breaking through the clouds. He had been down this path before, fighting for the truth, even when the odds were stacked against him. But this time, it felt different. The stakes were higher, the consequences far-reaching. There was no way to predict what would happen next. As he drove, his thoughts drifted back to the events that had led him here. The abandoned motorcycle, the badge number, the documents. It all felt like a puzzle he had been piecing together, and now the final piece was in place. The evidence was irrefutable. The corruption that had been hidden for so long was now exposed, and he held the key to unlocking it all. But as the veteran drove on, he couldn't help but wonder if the people behind this would just let him walk away once it was all out in the open. He had seen enough of the world to know that powerful people didn't give up their hold easily. They fought back, no matter the cost. He glanced over at Ash, who was resting quietly beside him, sensing the tension in the air. The dog had been his companion through it all, and now, more than ever, it felt like they were in this together. His phone buzzed again, snapping him out of his thoughts. He reached for it, his fingers trembling slightly as he answered. "It's done," a voice on the other end said, calm and assured. "The first wave is set. The media is on board, but you need to be prepared. Once this hits, it won't be easy." The veteran nodded, his eyes narrowing. "I know. I'm ready." "Good. Keep your head down for now. Once the information is out, things will get complicated. People will start looking for answers, and they'll come for you. But don't worry, everything's been arranged." The veteran didn't reply immediately, his mind racing with the possibilities. "All right," he said finally. "I'll keep low until I hear from you again." He hung up, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. The final step was approaching, and there was no turning back now. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. He had come this far, and he couldn't stop now. As he neared his destination, a small, run-down building on the outskirts of town, the sense of urgency grew. This was the place where everything would change. The veteran parked the car, Ash jumping down beside him. The fog was thick in the air, the world around him shrouded in a quiet mystery. He moved quickly, his footsteps echoing as he made his way inside the building. The door creaked open, and the veteran stepped into the dimly lit room. The man from the cafe was already waiting for him, his eyes scanning the room as if making sure they were alone. "You're here," the man said, his voice low but serious. "It's time." The veteran nodded, walking over to the table where the secure line phone rested. "I've got everything," he said, his voice steady. "It's all ready to go." The man didn't waste time. He grabbed the phone and dialed a number, speaking quickly and quietly. The veteran could hear the low murmur of the conversation, but the words were indistinguishable. He could feel the tension in the air growing, like something was about to break. After a few minutes, the man hung up and turned to face the veteran. "It's done," he said, his expression hardening. "Now we wait." The veteran felt a sense of finality wash over him. It was out of his hands now. The truth had been exposed, and there was no turning back. He had done his part, and now it was up to the world to decide what to do with it. But even as he stood there, the feeling of unease didn't go away. He knew that the road ahead would be dangerous. There would be consequences for what they had just done, and it wasn't going to be easy. The veteran took one last look around the room before turning to leave. Ash followed close behind, its eyes still alert. The veteran couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, something that would change everything. But for now, all he could do was wait. The veteran couldn't shake the tension that gripped him as he walked down the quiet street, Ash following closely by his side. The small town around him felt different now, as if it too were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The evidence was out, the documents and photographs had been handed over, and the world was about to learn the truth. But despite the weight lifted from his shoulders, he couldn't help but feel like a target. The feeling of being watched had only intensified since he had made the decision to expose the corruption. The phone call he had received that morning only confirmed his fears. They were coming for him. It wasn't just the people he had exposed that he had to worry about now. It was everyone who had been protecting them. The powerful figures in the shadows who would stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried. He could feel their presence in the air, like a storm gathering on the horizon. He had made himself a target, and now there was no turning back. He turned the corner, heading toward the abandoned building where they had met just days ago. The meeting was set for later in the evening, but the sense of urgency still weighed heavily on him. Every step he took seemed to echo louder than it should, the quiet town now feeling like a place full of hidden dangers. The veteran checked his watch as he reached the building. He was early, but it didn't matter. His mind was focused on the task at hand. He had done everything right, everything he could. The truth was out there now, but it felt like nothing would ever be the same. The door creaked as he entered, the familiar dimly lit room feeling even more tense than it had before. The man he had met earlier was already there, his face unreadable, his eyes scanning the room for any signs of trouble. "You're early," the man said, his voice low and cautious. "I wanted to make sure everything was in place," the veteran replied, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts in his head. "Everything's in motion," the man said. "The media is on board, but there's still a lot we need to control. The people behind this are already trying to cover their tracks. We need to stay one step ahead of them." The veteran nodded, his eyes narrowing. "I'm ready for whatever comes next." The man studied him for a moment before giving a small nod. "Good. We'll have to move quickly, but we can't be reckless. The media will spread the story, but we need to make sure the right people see it. We'll get them talking." The veteran couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope at the thought. Maybe this could work. Maybe this time, the truth would be enough. "And after it's out?" the veteran asked, his voice low. "Then we wait," the man said. "We'll monitor the response, stay in the shadows. But we can't let them think we've given up. They'll come after us." The veteran felt a shiver run down his spine. He had expected danger, but hearing it out loud made it real. The people they were up against weren't just corrupt officers. They were powerful forces, pulling strings behind the scenes. They had made sure that the truth stayed buried for so long. "I'm ready," the veteran said again, his voice steady but firm. The man reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, black phone. "Take this. It's secure. If anything goes wrong, we'll contact you through this. You'll need to be careful. There's no telling how far they'll go to protect themselves." The veteran nodded, taking the phone and slipping it into his pocket. He had no choice now. He had come this far, and the only thing left to do was see it through. The truth was out. The battle was just beginning. "Thanks," the veteran said, his voice a little softer now, a weight lifting from his chest. "Let's make sure they don't get away with it." As he left the building and stepped back into the cold night, the world seemed quieter, the weight of the situation pressing in. He glanced at Ash, who was walking beside him, its eyes alert, its tail still. The dog had been by his side through it all. It had been his only constant, his only true companion in the darkness. The veteran didn't know what the future held. He didn't know how much longer they would be safe, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't let the people responsible get away with it. He had to fight, not just for himself, but for everyone who had been wronged. The path ahead was uncertain, and the road would be long and dangerous. But the veteran was ready. He had the truth, and he wasn't going to let anyone take it from him. The veteran stepped out of the alley, the chill of the evening air biting at his skin as he made his way down the deserted street. The faint glow of streetlights cast long shadows, and the world felt eerily quiet, almost too quiet. Ash trotted beside him, its head low, sensing the same tension that the veteran felt. He had done everything he could to prepare. The evidence was out there, the truth was now in the public eye, and the world had started to take notice. But with that came a new weight, one that pressed down on him with every step he took. The people behind the conspiracy would not simply let it go. They would retaliate, and he knew it was only a matter of time before they came for him. As he reached the end of the street, the veteran's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out quickly, his fingers tight around it as he answered. "It's done," the voice on the other end said, calm but urgent. "The story's gone live. But we've got a problem." The veteran's pulse quickened, his eyes scanning the quiet street. "What do you mean, a problem?" "The response has been swift," the voice continued. "They're trying to discredit everything. People in the right places are already pulling strings to suppress the story. You need to be careful. They're making their move." The veteran's heart sank. He had known this would happen, but hearing it from someone else made it feel real. "What's the next step?" he asked, his voice steady but filled with tension. "You need to lay low. We've already prepared for the backlash, but you've got to be careful where you go. They've already tried to get to a few key journalists and officials. If they find you, they'll try to silence you." The veteran's grip on the phone tightened. "I'll be careful," he said. "But this isn't over. We've exposed them, and now we have to make sure the world knows what they've done." "That's what we're counting on," the voice said. "But right now, your safety is the priority. If you get caught up in this, it'll be over." The veteran nodded, even though the person on the other end couldn't see him. Understood. I'll keep my head down. Let me know if anything changes. He hung up the phone, his thoughts racing. They were coming for him. That much was certain. The people who had built their empire on lies, who had twisted the truth to their advantage for so long, wouldn't let this go. The veteran knew he was now a target. He glanced at Ash, the dog's steady gaze giving him a sense of calm in the chaos of his mind. Let's get out of here, he muttered, turning on his heel and heading back to his car. Every movement felt deliberate, measured. He couldn't afford to be seen, couldn't afford to make a mistake. The world was watching, and the people he had exposed would stop at nothing to silence him. As he drove through the night, the road ahead seemed endless, each mile adding to the weight on his shoulders. The drive was long, the only sounds the hum of the engine and the soft breathing of Ash. The veteran couldn't shake the feeling that someone was always just behind him, watching, waiting. The fog rolled in thick, the world outside his window obscured, as if the universe itself was hiding its secrets. He needed to keep moving, to stay ahead of whatever came next. But where could he go? Who could he trust? The thought haunted him as he passed through empty towns, deserted highways, and quiet streets. His phone buzzed again, pulling him from his thoughts. He glanced at the screen. It was a message from the contact he had been working with. They know where you are? Move now. Don't stop until you're out of the city. The veteran's heart skipped a beat, and he didn't hesitate. He pushed the accelerator, the engine roaring as he sped away from the city, leaving everything behind. Ash's low growl filled the car, its ears back, sensing the tension in the air. The veteran didn't slow down. He couldn't afford to. Not now. Not when they were so close. As the miles stretched out before him, he realized just how far he had come, and how much further he still had to go. There would be no easy answers, no quick fixes. The road ahead would be long and dangerous, and the battle for the truth was far from over. But he had no choice. He couldn't stop now. He had come too far, and with the truth finally out in the open, there was no turning back. The veteran's eyes were fixed on the road as the car rumbled along the narrow highway, the world around him a blur of dim lights and empty streets. The fear that had been building inside him for days still lingered, but it was now mingled with a strange sense of resolve. He had been running for what felt like an eternity, always a step ahead of those who would stop at nothing to erase the truth. But now, he had come to the end of the road. He had no more places to hide. The truth was out, and there was no turning back. As the miles stretched on, his phone buzzed again, the harsh vibration cutting through the quiet of the car. He glanced at it quickly, his heart racing. It was another message from his contact, the one person who had helped him navigate this treacherous journey. "They've found you," the message read. "You need to move, now." His stomach churned as he pressed the gas. Pedal harder, his grip tightening on the wheel. His mind raced. It had always been a matter of time. The people behind this conspiracy were relentless, and now they were closing in. He couldn't outrun them forever, but he wouldn't go down without a fight. The message had come too late. They were already here. The lights in the rearview mirror reflected off the windshield, growing brighter as the car behind him closed the gap. The veteran's heart pounded in his chest as he swerved the car to the left, taking a sharp turn onto a deserted side road. The tires screeched, and Ash, his loyal dog, barked nervously from the passenger seat. The veteran didn't slow down. The road was narrow and winding, the trees looming on either side like silent witnesses to the chase. He could hear the car behind him, its engine roaring as it pushed forward, determined not to let him escape. But the veteran was determined, too. He had survived too much to be caught now. He could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins, his thoughts focused entirely on the road ahead. He had no plan. He had no backup. It was just him and the car, racing against time. The car behind him was gaining ground, its headlights blinding in the rearview mirror. He had to think fast. His eyes darted to the side of the road, where a thick patch of trees opened up, leading to a narrow dirt path that veered off into the woods. Without hesitation, he jerked the wheel, sending the car off the paved road and into the rough terrain. The car bounced and jolted, its tires slipping on the uneven ground, but the veteran gritted his teeth and pushed through. The trees flashed past him, the world outside the car a blur of dark shapes. The sound of the pursuing car grew fainter, but he knew it wouldn't be long before they found him again. The veteran could feel the sweat on his brow, his breath quick and shallow as he fought to keep the car under control. The path was winding and treacherous, but it was his only chance. He had to outrun them, even if it meant losing everything. He wasn't going to let them silence him. Not now, not when he had come so far. The headlights of the pursuing car flickered in his rearview mirror, the gap between them closing faster than he had hoped. His hands gripped the wheel tighter as the dirt road grew rougher, the wheels of his car bouncing over rocks and branches. He had no idea where this path led, but it didn't matter. He had to keep going. Just as he thought he might lose control, he saw a break in the trees up ahead, a clearing. It was small, barely big enough for a car to fit, but it was enough to buy him some time. With a quick decision, he steered the car toward the clearing, the engine roaring as it powered through the underbrush. The tires skidded on the loose dirt, but he managed to bring the car to a halt just as the clearing opened up into a small, hidden field. The veteran threw the car into park, his heart still racing as he grabbed the secure phone from the passenger seat and dialed the number he had been given. The phone rang for what felt like an eternity before the familiar voice answered. "It's done," the veteran said, his voice strained but determined. "I've made my move. Now we wait." "Good," the voice replied, calm despite the tension in the air. "You've done what you needed to do, but you're not out of danger yet. They'll be looking for you." The veteran nodded, even though he knew the person on the other end couldn't see him. "I know," he said quietly, "but the truth is out. They can't take that away." He hung up the phone and looked at Ash, who was still sitting quietly in the passenger seat, its eyes wide and alert. The veteran knew he couldn't stay here for long. The car had been left behind, but his enemies wouldn't stop searching until they found him. The pursuit would continue. But for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope. The battle wasn't over yet. The truth had been exposed, and no matter what they did, they couldn't erase it. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for everyone who had been silenced by the corruption that had plagued this town for too long. The veteran took a deep breath, straightened his back, and looked out into the open field. There was still more to do, but for now, he would stay hidden. He had survived this far, and now he would fight until the very end. In this gripping tale of courage and determination, a seasoned veteran embarks on a journey to expose corruption and bring justice to those silenced by powerful figures. As the truth unravels, the veteran finds himself at the center of a dangerous conspiracy, with everything at stake. Each step he takes towards uncovering the dark secrets tied to a forgotten motorcycle leads him deeper into a web of deceit, where the line between right and wrong becomes blurred. As this veteran story unfolds, the stakes grow higher, and the veteran must face his greatest challenges yet, all while staying one step ahead of those who would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. With the truth finally coming to light, the veteran finds that the battle is far from over, and the fight for justice is just beginning. In this intense and emotional journey, the veteran's resilience, courage, and determination are tested like never before. Follow this remarkable veteran story as he risks everything to expose the darkness hidden in plain sight. This veteran story is one of many that shows how the truth, no matter how dangerous, must always come to light. Whether facing insurmountable odds or battling those in power, the veteran remains steadfast in his mission. The world is about to see the truth, and this veteran story proves that even in the face of danger, justice can prevail.